There we go. Um, so Eric informed me, and I'm really stoked that we're recording this episode on Jimi Hendrix's birthday,
Oh, incredible.
right? Let's see.
Um, Also, Karen O's birthday was this week.
Yeah, it's a very magical time. Lots of magical Sagittarian folk around.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I figured for my segment, I was like, you know what? I've like been a music person for a very long time. So I was like, I'm gonna just like outline it and we'll discuss.
No, I think, the main facts about Taliesin in, and then I've got over here pulled up a separate article about the Mabinogian connection.
Oh
This
yeah.
guy, this guy's got a lot going on.
Yeah, I think that like a cool little side quest episode could be talking about like all the like the King Arthur stuff in the Mabinogion and like how much like Welsh influence there is and what we think of as like British folklore because Wales and Britain are different cultures.
Yeah.
Um anyway, but I know we're like sharing the patio lady segment with our Patreon now, and I just wanted to show my new ashtray that I got, and it's a siren.
Oh my God, love that.
Like, how cute is she?
I also just love that it's like scallop shaped.
Yeah, yeah.
Big
Because
fan.
I've got my Drew Martins today that I'm going to be enjoying while we do this. Because I'm like, how can I talk about music and magic without smoking a little weed?
No, really though.
I'm pretty
Um,
sure that would be illegal,
not me coughing.
right? Anyway, but so what do you think of the hair?
Oh, loving it, loving it. Did you add another layer to it?
So I went ahead and just did like a really dark, like wine colored burgundy because I was
Mm,
like, I liked the silver, but I was like, ah, I don't know. It's hard when you have a new job. And I was like, it was really fun to have during like vacation. But mostly I was like, I don't want the parents to be weird about me having like amethyst colored hair, even though
yeah.
I really liked it. Because it's like, this is one of the first jobs where I'm like regularly not covering up my tattoos. So I was like, I feel like I can be comfortable doing one thing.
Although, you know what I think is funny, as someone who loves to be just like a pixie boy and have crazy vibrant colored hair, is that little kids will be the first ones to be like, "That's so cool,"
Oh, yeah.
because they have no filter.
They love it. No, and the kids are so sweet. I love, Eric always jokes about me being cool kid Shannon because I get to, like, talk to the kids all the time. But yeah, so I figured I'm like, this is it looks a lot more purple in the light than it really is on here. It's really like a deep burgundy. So I was like, this is cool. And then I ordered some, there's this brand that I found called Lunar Tides that does, like, deposit hair color, and they call it their Magic series, and there's a color called Magic Charm that's, like, a black pink that they
Mhm.
put mica in to make it, like, kind of sparkly. So, I ordered that, and I'll, like, use that too.
Well,
We'll see.
we love a hair dye adventure.
I
See,
just
I
feel like
see.
I needed a change.
I'm trying to grow my hair out, so I can't do anything to it except condition it. I'll just keep conditioning it.
I did do this is a demi, so I did it with, like, a volume 10 developer, so I can definitely tell that my hair is not virgin anymore, but I won't do any more than, like, a volume 10 on it because it's so long and I don't wanna lose.
Yeah, no, you gotta take care of it. You gotta take care of it.
Yeah.
We're
So
gr
that's why
we're gr
after this,
we're grown-ups. We're not doing, like, level 30 bleach
um, drunkenly doing level 30 bleach on our hair while we drink, like, shoplifted champagne,
right out of the bottle, right out of the bottle, because
which hurts your nose.
it does. It does, but we were dumb,
We
and we
were
thought we
dumb.
thought that was fancy.
That with our Piave. Oh my god. We were young once.
We were young
Um,
ones.
Anyway, well, I guess we should probably get this show on the road because you have work, I'm assuming.
Oh god, I hate these vapes. Okay.
Yeah. Oi. Okay. Well, hello and welcome to Wands and Fronds, the weekly podcast where we cover magic, herbalism, and more. I'm Shannon,
And I'm Nick.
and we're your co hosts. So today, I'm talking about kind of a broad subject, music magic. I think this is going to be kind of like a big overview intro, and then maybe we'll do some like deep dives into specific topics. Like, I'd love to hear what people are interested in about it because it is one of those things where like we're like, oh, talking about like moon magic. It's like, oh, what the fuck does that mean? Like music magic, also a giant topic.
And we love that. And honestly, I cannot think of anyone I would want to hear from more than you on this subject. Because to everyone that does not know this, Shannon does music.
I do music. I
So,
do music. Um, yeah, it's fun. I'm really excited to talk about it. But I'm also excited to hear about your topic.
yeah, well, so today I am barding it up with Taliesin, arguably one of the most famous bards in history.
We love a bard.
We do love a bard, but we're gonna get into that into the segment. So,
Yeah.
um, I will say though, I think being a bard is probably, I think, one of the more like Dionysian professions you could have.
Oh yeah. And it's like any game I've ever played, like any MMO where being a bard is an option, I'm always a bard. Like my character in Lotro, Lord of the Rings Online, was an elf bard
Love that.
because of
Love that.
course.
And of course, we're going to be talking about bard as an RPG class at the top of the
Because you
segment.
have to. But Nick, before we get into all of that, when did you feel magical this week?
Well, I am going to be kind of lame. I think people know that we are recording this the weekend after Thanksgiving. Which boo colonizers, boo his boo. But I do just love to make the food, and I really feel connected to my family in that moment, and um, just a warm and nice feeling.
I
Sort of
like that.
making the Thanksgiving feast. Although I did send you pictures, I will also say that my food did turn out gorgeously this
Yeah,
year.
it was
Um,
beautiful.
It was art. It was art, and with all of that sage, it's very cleansing.
Yeah, I definitely used like sage from my garden when I was making my stuffing, which, always feels nice. And I do think there is something so magical about making food. And maybe I would have felt more magical about it if I hadn't had to go to urgent care for like trying to slice off my finger, which has never happened to me before in all of my years of like cooking. As much as like Nick and I both cook a lot, this is the first like semi-serious cooking injury I've had. I mean, they just glued it shut. I didn't like fully need stitches or anything, but there was a lot of blood and it ruined my pumpkin cheesecake, which I'm remaking today because like
You
it
really wanted that pumpkin cheesecake.
I really wanted it, and it was, like, so close to going into the oven when I, like, had my accident, and then there was blood splatter all over the kitchen. Like, the next morning, like, shut it down in the kitchen. It was on Wednesday night, and I was like, "No, we're gonna just, like, take a break. I'm not gonna finish prepping anything else. Everything else can happen tomorrow." And when I went in the next morning, it was like there were blood spatters, like, on the window, like, tiny little blood spatters, and I was like, forever the empathy I have for anyone on a cooking competition who cuts themselves has increased, like, 1,000-fold because
But
it gets
also,
everywhere.
the kitchen gods do occasionally demand a blood sacrifice.
They do, and they got it. But my magical moment this week, so Eric and I have this like tradition where we do cigars the day after Thanksgiving because we're old men. But it's nice, like as a former smoker, a little nicotine. But we were sitting out on my back porch, and Nick, I shit you not, you know how I've got my little L couch now, and
Uh-huh.
like that end is right next to the hummingbird feeder. constant hummingbirds, just, like, coming right up, like, 2 feet away from me while we were outside smoking cigars in the morning, and I felt like fucking Snow White. Like, the
Wow.
hummingbirds just did not care that we were there, they were just getting up so close that we could, like, literally see every little feather detail on them, and it was, like, ah, amazing.
I do love hummingbirds.
Me
Do love
too.
like, every time, and I love in your apartment area specifically, it's like hummingbird city.
It is. There are so many hummingbirds, and because we're in Los Angeles, even though it's, like, basically December, the wildlife is all here. Like, it doesn't really leave. It's like it's all around. So, anyway, well, I guess this is kind of a long and maybe meandering topic, so I think we should get going. I wanna say at the top of my segment that my, husband let me know that we are recording this episode on Jimi Hendrix's birthday, which feels right. So Eric was listening to a Jimi Hendrix record downstairs while I was, like, taking a shower before this, which was really, like, setting the mood.
And I just wanna say I've sort of unintentionally made the highlights purple this week, which feels appropriate.
Yeah, very appropriate. So, I think one of the first things I wanted to start with up at the top is, like, finding out ways to incorporate music into your magical practice is really about, like, getting to know yourself, because I think sometimes there's this, like, idea that, like, witchy people all have to be into, like, Enya, and it's like, okay, if that's your jam, awesome. But you can, like, do music in your, like, magical practice with anything that floats your boat. It's like if you're a metalhead, there's magic in your connection to that music, and I just wanna, like, remind people that we hold space for all kinds of music tastes here, unless you're, like, solidly into pop country, in which case I'm gonna side eye you. Um, you can like it, but if that is, like, your identity like it is for some people, that don't impress me much, as Shania would say. Um, so one of I think the easiest ways though to incorporate magic into your practice, especially if it's something that you're like new to and you haven't really done a lot of yet, is like using music to charge your space. So we talk all the time about like cleansing spaces, like doing smoke cleansing, doing other sorts of like spiritual cleansing, sort of like doing visualization. And a lot of times you'll hear people that are like, okay, like you burn the sage and then you burn this other thing to like charge it back up. And it's like, sure, you can do that. But something I love doing, especially if I'm going to have people over or like if I'm about to do a big spell, is to like come up with music to play after doing the cleansing and letting the music kind of charge your space. You know, like some people are like, "Oh, you can use tones like crystal ringing bowls and bells." And like, yeah, you can totally do that if that's your jam. But I'm like in the era of Spotify, of a lot of like large record collections, of being able to get music on your phone. Why not curate a playlist that has the type of energy you want to bring into your house? So, you
I
know what
do
I'm saying?
I do honestly have a specific corner 'cause, okay, and you know this about me, I have one playlist, only one playlist because I'm a psychopath, and it's, like, over 100 songs, but different parts of the playlist are for different things. There is one corner of the playlist that is specifically getting ready for a date music, and so, yeah, I definitely am listening to different kinds of music to get ready for different things.
Yeah. I think it's like something that feels so common and people are like, "Oh, well, whatever, like a playlist, how is that magic?" And it's like, "Okay, intention. Intention's what makes it magical, right?" Like everything that we do as witches that's like spellcraft, some of it is like hella mundane. Like you can just take a fucking bath, but if you add intention to it and you like are being purposeful when you're in the bath, hi, that's a that's magic. So I love the idea of using like certain playlists, but also having like totem songs, right? So like instead of carrying like, you know, a little spell satchel with you, like putting together a little like necklace or something with a spell on it, maybe you have like a song for certain types of like energy you're trying to bring into spaces too. And it's like, of course, I love to listen to Lizzo when I need to get pumped up. That can become magic when I like bring intention to it and I'm like inviting that energy to fill my space. So I think that's one of the biggest things with, like, using music magically. It's, like, just like it is with anything, you have to, like, focus on having that intention come into it, because there is something about music that just is inherently magic, like, it exists in the natural world. There's this big movement that I've seen a lot of different musicians and, like, magical people doing online, where they'll take electrodes and, like, attach them to things like mushrooms or moss or trees or grass, and, like, finding the electromagnetic, like, waves that are emitted by different plants and using that to create electronic music. And it just really drives home this thing that it's like music is just like vibration. Vibrations exist everywhere in nature. And one of the cool things about being a human is that you can interpret the vibrations from all sorts of living beings and incorporate that like into your craft. So I love the idea of intention and singing to your garden. Hello. Hi.
Well, we talked about this a little bit, when we were talking about I think it was poetry magic, don't quote me on this, but how a lot of people, I think, don't give themselves enough credit for the creativity that they have. One of the things which I said in whatever segment that was, and I'm really drawing a blank here, but was that think about the dumb little songs you sing to your pet and
Oh my God. Yeah.
how good and elaborate those can be, because, I mean, obviously, your pet's not gonna judge you. I have so many ridiculous little songs that I sing to both of my cats, um, and they're quite good. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but
Oh, no, I mean, I have an entire theme song for Willow to the tune of the Gentleman Jack theme song. Like,
incredible.
it's it is magical too, and, like, I think that's something too that I really wanna, like, emphasize here is, like, when I'm talking about, like, singing to do your magic, like, you don't have to have a great voice. You don't even have to be, like, able to hit tones. I think there's something about, like, making that sound with your own body that is inherently more magical than just playing something. I do think playing music and, like, using totem songs, creating playlists for stuff is, like, of course, can be very powerful. But there is something about like doing it with your own body that I think kind of brings it to the next level. So I really love the idea too of like getting into this like sort of space of creating a playlist, using that as like a foyer into singing your own stuff when you're doing spell crafting. And that's something this idea of like creating songs like theme songs for your pets, right? Like you sing these songs to them and you just make it up, but then it becomes something that sticks and you keep it because like everyone I know has like pet songs that they could basically record because they've
Mm,
sang them
mhm.
so many times.
Yeah.
Take that energy into spell casting, right? It's like, what is a song that you really love that like pulls at that part of your like spiritual being that you're trying to like manifest with during your spell crafting, right? So like think about a song that really fits and then try to like write your own words to it that are kind of like going with your intention. I think that's kind of a way to get into like a little bit of poetry magic, but then like singing it. And like, even if you're just like, if you can't play an instrument, that's fine. Like, clap along to create the beats. Like, just hear the tones in your heart, but like being able to craft your own words for a spell to the tune of a song that you really are feeling. I'm like, I I can't imagine anything that's like more inherently magical than that.
Well, and I would also say, kind of in that same vein too, it's like I'm always writing bad notes app poetry, um, perhaps in the hopes that someday I'll write some actual poetry that will be good, but you have to just, like, write about kind of everything. Uh,
Yeah,
like, I sent you my little poem about the wasps,
I did love that.
um, and always I think, like, you're the only person I show stuff like that to, so but it always nice to have, like, one kind of trusted friend that you can be like, look at this thing I did.
I love it, and I was thinking, like, along the lines of, like, turning something like that into music is, like, that poem just has such, like, Lana Del Rey vibes.
Yeah.
Like, finding a Lana Del Rey song you really like if you were trying to, like, do a spell to, like, honor the wasp spirits because, like, God knows there are plenty of those around in Texas. I think that would be perfect. So I do like this idea of, like, writing your own music, and I think for some people, it's like the idea of writing your own music can sound so daunting because then you imagine you have to, like, be a fucking composer and, like, nose to tail it with, like, music writing, but you don't have to. It's like we do that all the time with our pets. You don't have to come up with your own thing. Also, the idea of folk music where you're just, like, reimagining songs that are shared across cultures was the primary way that music was shared until very, very, very recently in human history. So if you're not, like, feeling some sort of creative genius to, like, Jack White your own shit, you don't have to. It's like find something that feels powerful to you. I encourage you to write your own words to it because, like, that's super fun. And then even if it's goofy and bad, it's like releasing that creative energy, I think just, like, helps bring more magic into whatever you're doing. But even if you don't write your own words, you know, it's like picking a song that you like and singing it and using it to manifest into, like, whatever spell work you're doing. That's not unfounded. Like, there's a reason folk songs are folk songs and, like, everyone knows them because that's, like, how humans, almost like the bards did, would tell stories. You know, that's, like, one of the biggest pieces of artwork that has existed for millennia. Like, before people were writing stuff down, people were telling stories and singing. Like, that's just always been something they did. So, getting back into some ways that you can, like, very purposefully incorporate your craft into your magic though, because you guys know I'm a planty witch. I love singing to my plants. And I think that's something I mean, there have been all those science studies where, like, they've played Beyoncé for plants and, like, done no music for some, and, like, they've shown that singing and, like, hearing good music actually helps plants grow more, and I think this is something that, like, witches inherently understand, right? It's like this idea that everything is interconnected, and when we're talking about music, we're talking about, like, tonal vibrations that are pleasing to the ear. Like, when you're listening to a harmony, it does something in your brain. It, like, tickles your brain. It feels good when you're listening to those, like, the spinning that happens between thirds, you know? So I think it makes sense that your plants can understand that. You know, they can talk to each other. We know that. So the idea that, like, singing to your plants can not only, like, help them grow better, but I think it's also really important if you're someone who grows plants to use for magical purposes. So, like, if you're harvesting a plant to use in a specific spell, think of a song, think of music that kind of, like, invokes the work that you're about to be asking that plant to do. Because to me, that feels number 1, it's like respect, like, you should, like, give offerings to the plants when you're taking from them to use it, but I think it also sort of, like, helps set the mood, right? Kind of like that playlist that you put together for your hot date, it's like you're putting together sort of the musical energy that you're putting into the plant before you even, like, harvest it to bring it into your spell. And I really do think it makes you feel so much closer to your plants, which I know for people that, like, aren't planty witches, that might sound weird, but genuinely, like, I have a relationship with my plants. In particular, like, you know, like houseplants and things that aren't annuals, things that you live with year after year. My aloe plant out front and I have an understanding. You know, it's like and singing and communicating with them is, like, a really great way to foster that relationship, to deepen it, to give them an offering, but then also to, like, help set the mood, again, like, for the spells you're trying to harvest them for. So, that's one of my favorite, like, low lift ways to use music in my magical practice is just, like, singing to my plants. But I think that I would be remiss, especially because I feel like we're coming out of Scorpio season, we're heading into Sagittarius season. These are sexy times of year. Everyone's feeling randy. You're inside, like, by the roaring fire. Music and sex magic really go hand in people that are maybe like a little I'm speaking from personal experience here. Sometimes I can feel uncomfortable in sexual situations. Hi, I was raised in puritanical America, like so many people. But having like a good playlist, I think can kind of like ease some of that tension. But again, it's like especially I think if you're doing like masturbation as spellcraft with like sex magic, I think that having a playlist is key. Like number 1, it helps distract, I think, from the dead silence that can feel very unsexy to me. But again, it's like helping you get in the mood and,
Well,
covering up noise if you have roommates.
here's what I will say. Here's what I will say. I think the kind of gay answer to this too is that is like circuit party music,
Hmm.
because hear me out, hear me out. So that they have this like circuit party music that they play at that kind of gay party, aka one where there is going to be like people having sex with each other. And they also, they have a lot of like playlists for stuff like that online for you to enjoy at home. And also, it's used a lot in kind of adult films. So it's kind of like you almost get conditioned to be in a certain mindset when you hear music that has a certain tempo.
Yeah.
Um, which, isn't really connecting into the magical side of things, but all I'm saying is that there there you can kind of end up with some pretty strong conditioning using music as in conjunction with like sexy times.
Yeah. And I think it's like really powerful. Like the way that music can shift your mood so dramatically, I think is something that's so special about it as an art form. And to me, just like inherently feels like magic because it's like you can't tell me that there's not a song that you hear that immediately makes you feel like you're 17 again.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely, absolutely. I could
nostalgia is real.
and it's like, I definitely am so glad that the song that I lost my virginity to is not now a popular throwback song because that would be mortifying to just to hear that at the grocery store.
Oh god, yeah, if it, like, ends up on, like, a Muzak playlist, if Nick dies of shame, we know what happened. Um, but yeah, I like the idea of, like, in particular with sex magic, like, kind of incorporating that, and especially if there's, like, certain things that you enjoy. Like, there's some hot music out there. There's good, like, getting down to business music. So,
Oh,
like, explore.
well, I also feel like smooth jazz is one of those things where it's like it's the joke sexy music, but like actually smooth jazz, there's something to that. There's something
There's
to
a
that for sure.
there's a rhythm to it. So, I think play with that. But then there's also, like, as far as setting the mood, I love the idea of making your own, like, spell casting playlist that goes with different kind of magic because it can help you, like, stay focused. I think Nick and I have talked a lot about, like, being ADD witches. It's, like, not always easy to sit there and, like, focus on, like, staring at a candle flame for 30 minutes while it, like, goes down. So I think that having, like, the right music can really help. So there are, like, certain playlists that I have on my phone that are, like, not lyric music necessarily, but, like, really good, like, chimes and, like, almost like meditation style tracks that I really enjoy that I'll put together sometimes for, like, really meditative spell work because I don't necessarily want something with a lot of, like, lyrics that's gonna be, like, getting my prefrontal cortex overactivated, but having something in the background kind of, like, helps my brain chill out a little bit because I'm the type of person that needs background noise. Like, that's part of like, I will have my headphones in, listening to audiobooks when I'm cleaning. I'll have the TV on while I'm, like, editing the podcast. It's like I have to have noise in the background, and that's something that I know about myself. And so curating playlists for spells, I think is really, really powerful. And it's a good way to just sort of like help you focus. Because I don't know, I mean, maybe there are people out there that can just like plop right down into a meditative state and like stare at a candle for half an hour without like struggling, but I've not met any of them. So,
Well, I also feel that okay, and hear me out on this. I like this playlist that's like gentle piano music and then it's like mixed with nature sounds.
ooh, I like that.
It's like it's
I
on
like that.
it's on Spotify. And so it's kind of like really, really just like nondescript piano music, but they kind of fade it in and out with like birds and wind and like little stream noises and
Yeah. I'm a big fan of, like, ocean noises in my, meditation music playlists. I think they're incredibly, like, grounding for me. Something about just, like, hearing the ocean helps, like, keep me in my body because it also, like, sort of lines with your breathing too, which I think is, like, so
I
helpful.
I used to have this CD. I'm giving away my age here, people, but I had a CD and it was Chopin and ocean noises overlapped with each other.
That's beautiful.
It was so good. It was so good. And it really, this conversation is making me miss all of my hard copy media because I'm sure I could find that somewhere online, but it wouldn't be the same as
No.
finding that CD in a bin and being like, "Is this the perfect thing for me to have?"
I do still have a lot of my CDs. I wish that I had like one of the things that Nick and I used to do early on in our friendship was like make mix CDs for each other.
Mm,
Like
mhm.
that's how Nick introduced me to the Greenskeepers. Thank you. Um, and that was really powerful. And I think that's something too that it's like a lost art. Like make a playlist for people you care about. Like even if it's not on physical media, make a playlist for them. But there's also this idea that I had that I wanted to sort of like play with. And I think this is fun for people that are really into music. I love the idea of going into a record store, like one of those that has like the big bins because they exist all over the place. Going in and like kind of opening up your intention and finding, like, albums that you're drawn to, whether or not you know who the artist is. Pick them up, take them home, and make some magic. Because that, I think, is such an interesting way to also sort of, like, let your intuition bring new stuff into your life in a non-expensive way, because if anyone's been to a record store, there's always the bargain bin that's, like, super affordable stuff. It's I have, like, a super hokey, like, Disney Halloween background music album that is, like it costs, like, $3. So I feel like this is a fun way to kind of, like, get your intuition involved, have a bit of an adventure with it, because there's, like, sometimes it's nice to get out of the house, y'all, especially during the holidays when your family might be crawling up your ass for a few weeks. You know, go out, let your intuition bring you some new music, which I really love. And then of course, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about like making your own music and like using that magically. So, I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but Eric recently did a podcast called Die Emos Die. They're working on season 2 right now, but I was in the first season. And my character actually is a goth witch who uses music to turn people into emo zombies. So literally about using music to cast magic. But I got to write a song for it, and it was so much fun because, like, I have done choir and musical theater, and I've taken, like, voice lessons since I was, like, 7. But the idea of just, like, writing your own music I think just feels like such a powerful, like, spell casting technique, and so I just kind of wanted to talk through some, like, really easy logistics for people that are maybe interested in that, because I am not entirely, like I'm, like, not super great at the guitar. I mean, I'm like, I love singing, I have a great voice. I'm not necessarily the best writer, But again, there's something that still feels so powerful about it, even if it's not, like, gonna be Billboard charting. So, some cheap things you can get to make music at home. First, you just need, like, a cheap little laptop. I have a Windows Surface, like, tablet that you can convert into a computer that I use, and it works, it's fine. You're gonna need a USB audio interface, this thing right here. You can find them, like, for relatively affordable prices. This one I think I paid, like, 45 bucks for. You're gonna need a cord. There's, like, a very specific cord that you need, that you can find. Let me see if I can show this to you guys. So here's my, like, setup. You can see I actually use this to record the podcast too, which is convenient. And then you actually, for most of these, the reason I'm suggesting you get a USB audio interface is because you see here, there's like different places where you can connect like different instruments to it. So if you have like a cheap electric guitar, because you can find an electric guitar for no money at a pawn shop, literally no money. You can hook up your little USB interface. You can pop in your electric guitar cord, open up and like get Adobe Audition or whatever like music stuff comes for free on your computer. Pop in some headphones and you can fuck around with a cheap electric guitar and like create loops to make your own music. And it's really like you don't have to be Jimi Hendrix, speaking of his birthday, to, like, make cool stuff that you're really proud of that then you can save and, like, use that as, like, the background music when you're taking, like, a meditative bath, like, find some tones that hit well. Give yourself some, like, moody A minor shit if you're doing, like, spooky, like, shadow work type magic. Get yourself some stuff that, like, feels like different moods, and then, like, Adobe Audition, I think, is such a great, like, piece of software because you can actually get the Adobe Creative Suite for, like, 30 bucks a month instead of buying it all right out, which can be, like, hundreds of dollars. And then you can, like, play with different filters and, like, even go through and, like, record your voice and put it through, like, crazy choral filters that can, like, basically, it kind of, like, imitates the sound of, like, harmonized voices using what it pulls in. So it's like, I think computer technology has made it so much more feasible for people to make their own music in ways that's really accessible. And, it's not free, but you can do it in a way that's affordable because, like, you can source so much of this stuff from, like, secondhand stores or, like, going into a pawn shop, and then you can, like, create. Like, I think just the act of creating is in itself, like, so inherently magical and powerful, and you're just, like, never gonna feel better than when you, like, export the mix down, like, the multi-track mix down export feels so good after you write music. And so, like, I wrote a song for Daimo's Die Season 1, which you can hear. I guess I can link that in this, podcast
We're
description
doing
if
we're
you.
doing a in-house cross promotion.
Yeah, right, in-house cross promo, and I wrote a song for that. I wrote a song for another short film that Eric did too called Perfidia because my husband is also obsessed with music. We're both, like, really big music lovers. It's always been really important to our relationship, like, the fact that we have pretty similar taste in music has helped a lot, um but yeah, music I think is just it's so hard to, like, focus and talk about one aspect of it because it is just such a big, important part of my life, and it always has been. But I think the idea of, like, cheaply making your own mixes for doing spell work or, like, meditations is so cool and so fun, and, like, if I can do it, anyone can do it because, like, I
Well,
am not super tech savvy.
I would also say just something to think about too is I definitely ascribe different elemental qualities to the sounds of different instruments.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, definitely something to think about too is like kind of find what you think they are as well. but, like, I think guitar is, like, very earthy.
It's true. It's true.
Like,
It is very
I feel like guitar is very earthy. I feel like cello and, like, the basser string instruments are kind of, like, earthy as well. But I also think, like, a violin can be very airy. Like, once you
yeah.
kinda get into those high quick notes, I think a harp would be very, very airy as well.
Yeah. I think it's fun, and that's another great thing about, like, using technology to your advantage because, like, you can find simulators for different instruments, so it's like, you don't have to go out and, like, learn how to play the harp because, most people can't. They're
Most
fucking
people
hard to
and
play.
it's also an incredible barrier to entry is how expensive a harp is, for fuck's sake.
Right? So I love the idea of like, yeah, leveraging technology because we do live in the year of our Lord 2022. And there's so much that you can do without going out and buying a million instruments. So it's like, yeah, find some of those simulators, like play. It's like maybe you're really into like woodwind instruments, which to me also have like big air energy. I don't know. I'm like, if Libra were an instrument, she'd like probably be a flute.
Oh, yeah, I could absolutely see Libra being a
Or a
flute.
clarinet. Libra might be a clarinet, but she's a woodwind. She's a woodwind for sure. So I think that's such a good thing too. It's like I think of course find the music you like. There's so many amazing artists and you know maybe making music doesn't end up being for you, but I think everyone should try it because it's like I think everyone is an artist, but I think that the idea of creating music is something that touches so many people's souls because, like, every single person likes music. You don't have to like the same kind of music, but I've never met someone that's like, "Ah, I just don't like music." If I did, I would probably run because I don't know what would be wrong with them. Um, but there is just something so universal about it. So those I mean, those are just a few of the ways I guess that like I use music in my magical practice. I think you can use it to like spellcraft, to do energy charging. You can use the creative process as an outlet to basically make your own magic and definitely go listen to some like records because you can get like cheap ass record players now and I think going to a record store and record hunting is like very 90s, like, it feels very retro, but it's so much fun. It's so, so much fun.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, I've bought random records just because I wanted to,
Yeah,
basically. Uh, and honestly, like, one of my favorite songs I found is, like, this weird French song, but I found, like, the single for it in the bargain bin at a thrift store one time.
see, it's amazing. Again, your intuition leading you to new music that speaks to your soul. Like, that's so dope.
No, and what I that feeling of discovery too, like, I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean, I would just say I'm constantly listening to music though. It's like
yeah, it's
non it's
important.
it's nonstop. It's important. Um, okay, are we moving on to bards? Is it bard time?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I feel like it was a very broad topic, so I hope maybe there's some ideas in there that are helpful for people, and if there's anything you want us to talk more about, let us know. I mean, you can always hit us up, through Instagram at Wands and Fronds Pod. You can email us at wandsandfrondspod@gmail.com. You can join our Patreon, patreon.com/Wands and Fronds Pod. Pretty easy to remember. And then if you just want to support the podcast, rate, review, subscribe, literally write a little review, tell us in the review about what other music stuff you like to do, or send us a message, tell us what you're into, tell us what you want to hear more about. So there are the plugs.
Ooh, love the plugs. Give us 5 stars, BBs.
But yeah, let's talk about bards.
And I know we're just gonna be circling around to some of the same topics from music magic in the bard segment. So, um, I do want to say right off the bat here that I've always been very struck by the idea of bards, perhaps because it is so Dionysian. And I'm realizing that that's kind of where I'm at in my practice. Um, even and I have played a bard in Dungeons and Dragons before. I kind of go back and forth because I'm like, I want do I want to be a druid or do I want to be a bard? Um, maybe both. Why
Maybe
not
a druid
both?
bard.
Maybe a bard druid. Um, I did love the Sea of Trolls books as a kid. One of the main characters is just called the Bard, and he's also a druid, I feel, because he does use magic a lot. And I think to use another pop culture reference, I mean, I guess if people don't know what like a bard is, so in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, there's a scene following Sir Robin, who is accompanied by minstrels. And after running away from a fight, the singer is like immediately composing this song about how brave Sir Robin bravely ran away. Um, which I'm not going to attempt to sing right now, but it's a funny bit in the movie. Um, I actually watched that recently. So, you know, I don't it's just on the
I mean,
brain.
it's worth the rewatch,
It's worth the
people.
rewatch. But that's very bardy behavior. It's comedy, but it does kind of give a good example of what a bard actually did, which was not only to preserve history through song, but also to kind of like be a witness to the events as they were unfolding. And they would generally follow their patron, be it a king or a chieftain or whatever, around to the various battles and stuff for the biography of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite, recent bard representation is the bard in The Witcher, for anyone who's watched that, Netflix
Oh, sure.
series.
They did mention The Witcher in the Bard Wikipedia page, which,
Yeah, the bard character's great, and Henry Cavill's a babe, so it's like, I don't understand why you haven't watched it. Anyway, continue.
um so that would have kind of been the function of a court bard, which is what we think Taliesin was in real life. And that's kind of where we're going with this. So we're going to be talking about bards a little bit up top, but then we're mainly going to talk about a very, very famous bard. So Um, and there were also freelance bards, right? So you would be very lucky to get this sort of court bard gig, but sometimes there were bards that kind of traveled around, entertaining the village for the night in exchange for some hospitality, um, sing for your supper kind of vibes, right? And some of the ancient bardic stories are at least as old as Greek theater. But rather than having a whole cast and a chorus, the bard relied on the still very much mysterious power of music to capture his audience. So, more one man show vibes, but a common attestation at the time was that the way a bard could take you into the story with the power of music and the songs that they were singing must be a kind of magic because I mean, can you imagine? I mean, obviously people heard Bible stories and whatever else, always trying to convert people to Christianity um in like the 6th century or whatever, but your regular kind of man on the ground harvesting the wheat and, dying of pneumonia age 28 uh is has never heard a story as cool as Beowulf. And if you're rolling through and you're like telling that kind of story, that probably blew your fucking little mind right off.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, can you imagine? It's like you're just sitting in your little town, and then along comes a bard with a fucking epic to share with you.
And maybe a lute or a little harp or even, like a little mandolin kind of vibe.
Oh my god, we love a lute.
We do love a lute. But yeah, there is speculation that Beowulf might have been a bardic tale. It centers a lot around the fact that some of the language that's used is different than the time that it was officially written. So it must have been an oral tradition before that. Now, who is preserving the oral tradition at this time? Bards. So, you know. Um, but Beowulf is a fictional story. It does give us this really cool window into a very specific time in history and a very, very long gone culture. And of course, we love our fictional bards. But we thought it would be cool this week to look at a very real and famous bard, Taliesin, who is also kind of a fictional bard because he became a legend. And I think that's kind of cool. So, according to historians, he was a real person in the 6th century in Wales, but his life has taken on this mythical status in the intervening centuries. So, on the documented side of things, Taliesin was the court bard for Urien Reged and Kynan Garwin, the king of poets. And of course, both of their inheritors, at least one officially, although there's an unattested poem that they, kind of attribute to Taliesin about Kynan's heirs or whatever. Um, but those are the verses that are attested to him, and they are basically this kind of praise poetry that would have been written by a court bard about winning battles and these very, very long family genealogies. And of course, it's garnished here and there with tie ins to mythology and magic. And the funny thing is that it seems that Taliesin has barded so hard that he became a mythical figure.
Which is honestly goals. What better way, like, what better legacy than to become a myth?
Really, and it's like in conjunction with King Arthur. Like this is the level of like mythic that we're talking about because sometimes the story of Taliesin is part of the Mabinogion, and that it was officially it was included in the first Mabinogion and then taken out in later translations, but then put back in uh, recently. But then it's controversial whether or not Taliesin should even be in the Mabinogion. But also it's controversial whether the Mabinogion is really a collection of stories or if it's I mean, because there doesn't seem to be a through line for a lot of them. Um and they have the kind of four branches of the Mabinogion that are kind of like the little subcategories, one of which is the original Arthurian lore, the original Welsh kind of Arthur legends, which is very, very
Which
cool.
and it's like a great cocktail party fact. A lot of people don't realize that, but I think it's fascinating. Like, it is really cool, and the Mabinogion is, like, such a unique historical, mythological collection because, like, it almost sometimes feels a bit biblical and that it's, like, a bunch of stories that have, like, sometimes a similar cast, but sometimes entirely different casts of characters.
Well, here's what I kind of would think of it as. I think the Mabinogion could be looked at as the repertoire of one very accomplished bard.
I love that. I love that idea about it.
I mean, like, because it's such a loose collection, but you have some family genealogy stuff in there. You have some praise songs about winning various battles. You definitely have myths and magic.
Hell yeah. Hey, Merlin.
And you have a lot of like sort of local cultural flavor.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to look at it as, again, the repertoire of one very accomplished bard, perhaps someone like a Taliesin, then maybe it does make sense to include this kind of mythical story of Taliesin. Uh, and
I like that.
so, looking at the mythical side of Taliesin, so we know that he was a real guy. We know that he lived in the 6th century. We know that he was serving under at least two Welsh dynasties, which you would think, they might be kind of jealous. But maybe he was just that good that he could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you've gotta be good if instead of, like, ripping the baby in half, they decide to share.
They decided to share. Um, so in the mythical retelling of the life of Taliesin, he's originally the child of Ceridwen, and Ceridwen has sort of 2 children, one of which is very, very ugly. And she decides she's gonna make this magical potion in her cauldron, which is this is actually attested as the origin of, like, witches and cauldrons, is this sort of Ceridwen myth. So there's really a lot of very rich material just looking at this one bard, right? So she, sort of makes her other child stir or actually, no, initially, Taliesin is a servant, right? But he's gotta stir the cauldron for a year to make this potion for Ceridwen's ugly child, right? And he accidentally splashes 3 drops into his mouth, gaining all of the inspiration from the potion. And he's worried about what Ceridwen's gonna do when she finds out that he's had this magic potion. So he turns himself into they have this like really long chase where like he turns into a fish and then she turns into a sea otter and then so on and so forth. And then he turns into a grain and then she eats it. And
Yeah, which I think I'll have to link. I'm pretty sure we covered Taliesin in the Caradwin segment when we did her many moons ago. So we'll have to link if you wanna, like, learn a little bit more about her specifically.
right, right, right. So they have this really epic chase. And then because he's drunk the potion, he doesn't die inside of her. She just becomes pregnant with him but now as a baby, right? So she gives birth to the baby, who is now like the child of like a witch god, uh, reborn as. And she's like, I'm gonna throw this shit out in the ocean in a leather bag. I'm imagining a handbag, but like I know that's not appropriate to the time. But when they're
It's a
like in
Birkin. She
it's
just
a
tossed him out there in a Birkin.
right, right, right. Because that's what I saw in my head when I read leather bag, and then I was like, wait, no, it's not a handbag. Um, anyway, so and then washes on shore. So in the mythical version, before Taliesin works with these other Welsh kings that are real, is with this guy called Elphin. And Elphin and Taliesin have all of these magical adventures, always there's always kind of trickery afoot, and they're kind of sidekicks even. But Taliesin is kind of growing up with Elfin. Elfin's like a prince, right? And he becomes the court bard, and he prophesies the king's death. And so Elfin is obviously ascending to the throne, and he's like, well, you prophesied that. You must be the greatest like wizard slash bard of all time, whatever. And yeah, so and then he kind of moves into the real phase of his life after that because of course Elfin dies in battle. Many kings die in battle like a year or two after they become the king in this period of history.
Yeah, it's kind of
So
it's not exactly a long-term retirement plan type gig.
no. No. So but also in some of the later Arthurian legends from the 11th century, where it's kind of more congealed into what we would recognize as the Arthurian legends, uh, we really have Taliesin as like the bard in King Arthur's court, which maybe that's what even they were joking about in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But I mean, the timing. So if as King Arthur, the historical figure in the Historia Britannica or whatever, from like the 800s. but it mentions Taliesin as a real person, and that's one of the historical things that mentions King Arthur as a real person. And it would have been around the same time, and it would have been around the same place, but actually it is, about a century off. So if King Arthur was really this like Welsh king, it's very, very unlikely that Taliesin and King Arthur met, unfortunately.
Sadly.
Sadly.
Yeah.
But but later on, when they're both these kind of mythical characters, it does kind of make sense to put them together because, similar time, similar place. It's like 600 years later. So of course they're like, yeah, smush it together,
Yeah. They're like, "Why not? Collapse it."
collapse it. I mean, it's all horses and buggies anyway, right? But no. So a real bard who became a mythical bard, and also think, kind of the Book of Taliesin being included, and thinking of the Mabinogion as maybe one very good bard's repertoire, I speculate, and this is my speculation, that maybe the Mabinogion is the repertoire of the historical Taliesin, and that seems like a fun theory. So
I think that's a fun theory.
because
I
they don't
like.
they don't know it's based on an oral tradition. So
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing with us about Taliesin, which is so much fun. Um, so we're coming to the bitter end, and I have drawn a card for Sagittarius because I just wanted to do Sagittarius. So I have drawn the Adelita of Earth, which is represented by the yucca. For our Patreon people, you can see this pretty card. And I think this is like a really good card for our Sagittarian friends, you wandering little centaurs. So the idea of the Adelita of Earth card is that it's like an invitation to find ways to ground your spiritual practices by honoring the land. And the thing that I like about this card is it's like really specific that it's just about honoring the land, not necessarily specific place. So wherever you are, you can incorporate the land into your spiritual practice. And so it's like if you're traveling a bunch or you're moving around, like you don't have to tie your spiritual practice necessarily to a specific place, but tying it to the land is a really strong practice. So it's like reach back to your ancestors, update your familial traditions, whatever those may be, and put them into practice where you are, not necessarily where you're from, wherever you are in the world. Find ways to connect spiritually to the land. It's good for you.
I love that as a message for Sagittarius too.
Yeah. I know when I decided to do Sagittarius and I drew this card, I was like, "Oh yeah. Yeah, that tracks. That makes sense." From my friend with the Sag moon over here.
Not not me. But okay,
Not
so what do we say to all of these musical bitches?
to all of you musical bitches, we say blessed be bitches.
Blessed be bitches.
Goodbye.
Bye.